Hello, everyone. Hello. Hey, Shaunda, how are you?
Good. How are you doing? Good
Yeah,
morning,
very
good
good.
afternoon. I don't know where you are in the world.
Well, I am in New York right now. I am one couple of days away from going back to Australia, and I am looking forward to that after a month. How are you?
Doing good. We have last day of school here in Utah, so it's fun times.
Hey, look, I'm really excited about this session. I normally enjoy all of our like A banter, but B this particular session around, I think it's a spicy topic around the actual candidate search has fundamentally changed with um, applications like ChatGPT. So keen to dig into that. Also, uh, how that all works. How do you build strategies around that so that you can be part of that new candidate search when it comes to around content and storytelling? How do you use that? So maybe we kick off a little bit with a little bit about your background. I kicked off with my background at the top of the call. So maybe the audience can hear that.
Sure. Great. And I see some familiar faces, names on the audience. So excited to see some people. But for those that I haven't met yet, I'm excited to get to know you better. I think we're all in this world together. And just a little bit about my background. I started into this space of employer brand. Gosh, my 17-year-old was just born. So that's how I know how long ago it was. My background was in marketing and I was looking at General Electric and thought, I want to see what big corporate America is all about. I'm sure I'm going to hate it. But they had a job opening for a social media recruiter. So this is, mind you, again, 17 years ago. And I thought, well, I don't know anything about recruiting, but I know about social media. I think I can just apply the same tactics. And as some of you on the phone have heard me say, I got to this position at GE and they said, we don't want to post and pray anymore. And I thought, that is the weirdest thing I've ever heard. And then I learned what it was. We were posting jobs and we were praying that the right person applied. And I started digging into it and I'm posting on social media for them. And like, wait a minute, we're still posting and praying. We're just doing it on social media. And so I started really getting into the idea of storytelling and, how can we tell stories just like we did in marketing? How can we use the data in that storytelling to attract the right people into the right positions? And it took off. And I think it was kind of like employment brand before employment brand was really a mainstream thing. That's why my title was social media recruiter. And so we did that for quite a while at GE and it was exciting and we can talk more about that. But as GE was going through some tough times, I was getting calls from companies and I was learning a lot through the tough times, to tell you the truth. If any of you out there have been at a brand or you're at a brand that maybe, isn't having the best of economic times, you learn a lot in the hard times of how to attract talent. And I answered a call from the talent acquisition director at Qualtrics. Honestly, by mistake, I was getting done with a run and trying to turn off my music. And he said, "We want you to come work at Qualtrics out in Utah." And I was like, "Where?" And it was very unfair of me. We love Utah, but we ended up out here. Started at Qualtrics, where they were at about 1,000 people. Grew them to over 5,000 in 3 years. IPO'd or almost IPO'd, got bought, IPO'd, all the things on the roller coaster, and then worked for a smaller company called Data AI out of San Francisco, where we set up the recruiting for software engineers from proactive. So we set it up based on candidates, not based on requisition opening. We can talk more about that. And then a couple of years ago, got a call from Marriott and kind of thought, oh, I'm not sure I'm meant for hospitality, but I have loved it and been here for a couple of years. And I think we're now moving into what I would call kind of the next era of employment brand. Excited to talk about that here today.
Yeah, well, that's you're a real OG. You're a real original in this space. It's and that I love
Thank
the
you. Oh, Raj, that just means I'm old.
well, you're the same age, we're the same age, so I think I'm in good company. And hopefully, you feel the same. But I also love the fact that you're across different industries, different environments, different organizational life stages. So, and I think that all of those organizations in different stages and maturity are all facing some of the similar challenges now, which is in this, as you alluded to, this new era. So, I'd love to dig into that on, hey, how do you see that candidate search now changing? Like, and how do you see that applying to Marriott, where it's like, hey, no one, maybe I wouldn't go as far as to say SEO is dead, but I would go to say that, hey, there's some fundamental shifts in how traffic is occurring and how the actual just the candidate search experience is now changing.
Yeah. And I think just to kind of level set too of where I'm sure we have people on the phone that are part of small companies, large companies, maybe at different places on this employment brand journey, at the beginning of like, woof, I'm walking into this and not knowing what's going on. The way that I simplify it and I think can be applied to any size company at any state or any place in the journey is I simplify to three buckets. And so this will get to your search question in a second, but the three buckets are brand and messaging. So if I walk in and I'm saying we really need a revamp on employment brand, I'm really starting with like, what's our brand? What's our message? With Marriott, I think we have now 34 brands around the world. How do we look cohesive in our brand and messaging? And then like even at Marriott, we made it so that brand and messaging could be customized at what I call the local level. But what does that look like? The second big bucket, and you get that from EVP. When people start talking about EVP and all the things we get caught up in with EVP, you get that brand and messaging by asking people, why do you do what you do? And you realize here's our key messages that is specific to our company that we can, just go back and copy and paste all the time. And then where you're copying and pasting is your content. And I think this is where we're getting to like the search side of things. We can come back to that in a second, but like your second big bucket is your content. Okay, how are we bringing that brand and messaging to life? We're doing it through storytelling. We're doing it through collateral. We're doing it through videos, through written, big bucket of content that I think sometimes we come into employment brand and we jump right into content, but we forget like if we can lay a foundation, it really gives us a good solid content and messaging. And then the third big bucket is you can have content, you can have messaging, but if you can't get it in front of the right folks at the right time, there's actually no reason to have it. And so the third big bucket is that activation and distribution. How do we get in front of the right people at the right time? And I think to your question, I mean, I would encourage all our people out there, like ask yourself, when's the last time you Googled something? Like, I really have to think about that because I just ask ChatGPT everything now. Sometimes on my phone, I Google stuff because I'm older and I can't get ChatGPT to always anyways. But other than that, I'm not Googling a lot anymore, And why is that? Well, because I can ask really intelligent questions to ChatGPT. I don't have to say like Marriott career site. I can say, what's it like to have a job at Marriott? How would I get a job at Marriott? And I'm asking questions that like are more than just a website list of an answer. And so when we really think about our content and our distribution, and why I say I think we're moving into this next era is we no longer are looking at like people searching. I mean, we're not looking up Google search terms of like Marriott careers, right? We're actually like, when somebody says, what's it like to be a housekeeper at Marriott in ChatGPT, like what's coming up? And what's interesting about that, and I will never pretend to know everything about AI because it's way smarter than me. But I think what's interesting about that is like it pings really hard on individuality, customization, storytelling. It's not company websites that come up. It's not even like your Indoor and Glass or Indeed and Glassdoor. I haven't said that wrong. It's stories. So like when we haven't done a ton in this space yet, but like I'm out there every day, like trying to think of questions that people would be asking. And what's coming up are our life stories that we published on our blog. Thank goodness we did that. Because I think at the time when you're publishing stories on a blog and you're creating this library of content, it can kind of be like, what are we doing this for? And now I'm kind of counting my lucky stars because we're like showing up. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I was talking to the folks at IBM this week, and I think they, who are pretty mature as an organization, large employee branding team, I think they were just starting to dig into that. They were like, oh, hang on, but we've built so much, we've invested so much around search and around these properties. Have you like, how, if you're just at the start or if you're a bit late, if you've already made some investments, how do you think that folks can go about going, hey, I can reuse some of that as opposed to just throwing it all away and starting from scratch?
Yeah, man, it would stink to throw it away and start from scratch. Or like it would be so overwhelming to think that we have to start from scratch. I think again with the storytelling, like I was on a call last week with Handshake and I made the comment that I was like, everyone has content. And the chat went crazy. And they're like, what are you talking about? And I think really, if we really think about it, we have stories. Even if we actually, at my last couple of places of employment, we've implemented the MarTech. We gather all our storytelling through the MarTech. We create this library of content. But even if you haven't implemented the MarTech or something like it yet, like you have people out there telling stories. I don't know. I think that the data shows like over 50% of our employees are talking about their companies online and in everyday life. They're telling stories. Hopefully they're good ones. But it's really now this game of like, how do I capture? How do I organize this content? And to your point of not redoing things, I don't plan on rewriting our, I think we have over 300 associate stories now on the Marriott Life blog. Like, I don't plan on rewriting those. I just plan on trying to figure out how do we now use those in a lot of different formats, whether it's on social media or showing up in AI or whatever it might be. It's now using that content and organizing that content in the right way.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think I could spend all day kind of digging into that and the search because it's just a deep rabbit hole. But I'd love to maybe move on to the next piece, which is, hey, you alluded to it, these three pillars that you spoke about, which are the fundamentals of the actual like employer branding strategy. I'd love to understand the role of like content and distribution in particular, if you dive into it for organizations who, whether you touched on it personalized for different regions, different job roles, whether it's skill based, whether they started the journey and it's just they're building a drumbeat at the top. Yeah, love to dig into that.
Yeah, I think a couple different things is, you know, I think a lot of times we get really caught up in content and we spend a lot of time in content. The reality is, I mean, even when we came into Marriott, when I did 283 interviews with associates around the world because we have a lot of brands and a lot of levels and a lot of job categories, and I like did the interviews myself. I wanted to know why people did what they did. And the one thing that I kept hearing over and over again, and it wasn't like, oh, just in the United States or just in this brand. It was like, I want to know about real people doing real things. And I actually just got off a call with my university team this morning and I was like, no, it was like, we got real people doing real things, right? We got to have real people doing real things. Like, if anybody at Marriott knows me, that's like the drum beat of every day for me. And so I think sometimes we get into content and we're like, it seems like this massive undertaking. But the reality is our, and I also think as human beings, we actually want to tell our stories. Like we have a story, we have something that our story is unique to us. There's no one else in the world that has my story. And we want people to know about it. We want to connect on stories. Like that's how we connect as human beings. And so for us, content creation isn't about, photo shoots and videographers and all that kind of stuff. It's really about like employees telling their own story. And we will guide them. I mean, I think your guidance to them is this messaging and branding. So what we do in the Martech is we have different pillars under our EVP that we came up with, where we know people want to hear about how they can begin a journey in hospitality, how they can begin their career, how they can help others begin their career if they're a little further along. We know that people want to talk about belonging and community. And then we know that people want to talk about becoming something, not just in their own professional life, but also in their personal life and how Marriott allows them to do that. And so we'll tailor questions in the MarTech and have people answer back. The AI in there helps us write the right questions and helps them write the right answers, or at least in the right wording, but it still keeps that in that employee voice. And then I think also, and I think we're just getting to the tip of the iceberg with this. I think AI is really going to help us, but figuring out what resonates with what employees and across what, in what regions and what job families and what tenure. And then that's where then that activation comes in. And I think even to your question earlier, it's not more content. I don't know that anyone needs more content. And again, I'm sure the chat will go crazy, but I think it's knowing how to take the content that's out there and purpose it in the right spot at the right time for the right people. But again, I think the data and AI will really show us that.
It's that I think a lot of people here on this would believe in storytelling and believe that it should come from the employee's voice. But I think a lot of the struggles around that are potentially like, hey, I'm one person or I'm a couple of people, I'm lean. Like, how do I do this in a lean team? Like, love to hear how you've done that.
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways, right? And I actually, if you really, I will send them to you guys if you want them. I have charts where I have every activation channel, and it's internally and externally, and it's who it impacts. And so we've got our normal traditional ones, right? Like social media and website and, even job descriptions and things like that. But then I think we have stuff that we're forgetting about, like our employee advocates, right? If somebody is willing to share their story, They absolutely want to share it on their network. And so does their boss, and so do their teammates. And so that's another one, is just working on how do we activate our employees and create a brand ambassador army. How do we put content in front of them? And one thing I'll even comment on that, one thing I've really learned about activating employees is we actually get to learn from them what resonates with them. Because we can put a stream of content in front of them, we can have 5 articles, and they might choose one to promote on their network. And that's it. It's a real, I mean, like for us, we can do a hotel opening, we can do, brand expansion, and we can do a people story. And hands down, every time they are sharing the people story. And it's not just about recruiting, it's even about just even our company as a whole and showcasing the culture. So I think we got to remember those. And then internally is re-recruiting your own employees every day. Sometimes we don't put as much importance on that, I think, in employment brand, but we should maybe. And there's so many different channels that way as well. We have 60% of our frontline employees don't have email addresses. So we have to get really creative as far as how we activate and how we showcase those stories out there. And sometimes it's a quote card from the story. It's not necessarily the whole story, right? And somebody can then go research and find the whole story.
I think the non-desk based activation is a really tricky one, really pertinent for a lot of people, whether it's the SMS. But you guys do some really cool things there. So maybe a minute there just to dive into that one. I think a lot of people get value of like, how do I get, content from people who maybe they're the large portion of our workforce and a high volume hiring, and that's our need.
Yeah. It's funny because then I think we end up going back to like old school. Now we're talking about like AI and this like new era, but I think we've kind of gone a little bit back to old school with our getting in front of talent. But again, it's using the same library of content and then it's just activating in different ways. We do a lot of heart of house. It's our behind the scenes at hotels, in break rooms, or whatever that might be. We do a lot of promoting in those ways where it might be a poster on the wall. It might be a QR code on the poster that somebody can scan and read a story. It might be TVs if they have them back there. I've walked into some heart of houses where I'm like, whoo, brand overload. They got banners and all kinds of stuff. So they've got a lot going on that way. But also, it's just we do have, even through like we're partnered specifically at Marriott with our learning and with our internal communications. And so while they might not have an email address, they're during doing certain trainings or that sort of thing, and we're bringing all those stories through during trainings. We're bringing them through during branding that might happen with whatever kind of notification they're getting. But yeah, it's funny because it's a mix. But I think one thing that I'm really starting to realize is that it's not just about storytelling to recruit, it's about storytelling throughout the associate journey. Even if we've used this branding, if we've used these stories, if we've gotten in front of them in social media, and that's how we recruit them, then every moment that matters in their employee journey should actually play out the same storytelling, the same branding, and the same content and activation.
I love that. I absolutely love that. I'm going to touch on just a couple of more points, and then I think the time has flown by. I think we're going to call time pretty shortly, but I just wanted to touch on one of the things that I think is a hot topic in AI, and I think one of it's like, how do we do more with less, is the content repurposing and advocacy. How do I build an army of advocates who are propagating my voice? How do I repurpose so I'm not always going back to the well? Just some thoughts around both of those would be great, of how you guys are doing that at Marriott, how you see the world, your world view on that.
Yeah. So one data point that I found interesting recently was that when we cross over audiences, so like if I were to take our company page on LinkedIn, and then I were to take my executives audience on LinkedIn and, who they're posting to, and then I were to take like little old associate me and be able to, like take my network. Do you know that our networks only cross over 10%?
Yeah, wow.
So
That's
they're
wild.
90% unique. And when you're looking at I think again, and the next era of employment brand is it's impacting everything. Like for me, it's impacting our consumer brand, and we're partnering with our consumer brand in even more ways. And that's where even the storytelling, I was just on a call yesterday where they're like, we need to talk about our leadership program, whatever. And they're like, we're going to gather these stories. I was like, hold up. We have like 7 stories where they talked about this leadership program
Yeah.
already. And they're like, oh my gosh. So like, I really think we're crossing into this era where when you look at the fact that like only 10% of our audiences intersect, like we have to equip our associates and our employees in a way that our lawyers trust. I mean, Marriott's risk averse, just like any other company, but in a way that they trust and falls into that compliance. So yeah, I mean, the advocacy part to me is so important. One, because it is real people telling real things. Nobody believes companies anymore. I always tell this story. People on here have probably heard it already 100 times, but like, I don't like go try to find running shoes on Nike's website. Like I go to runners forums and I say, hey, who's running miles in Utah? Not that fast, but maybe on some trails or something. And I see people who have been there, done that. So we trust people. So we've got to get out there and we've got to equip our people, not our company, and not even reposting our company posts. Like we have to like equip them to post, publish the story and then equip them to say, hey, this is what this story means to me. But we also we can learn from that. And the data that can come from that is going to be extraordinary when we're talking about the impact that it can have. If I can learn that when my CEO posts something, these are some of the impacts that happen. But when I post that same thing with my twist on it or with my take on it, these are some of the impacts that can happen. The data and the AI should, I think, really quickly soon help us in that area and help us be really targeted on what content we need and streamline that, where we need to put it and get in front of the right people and how we're using it. I think we're just at the tip of the iceberg of how I'm not Google searching anything anymore. Now we're going to move into this, like, be very prescriptive on how we can be using everything.
I could go in all day on this. In fact, I think I have spent all day with you on the conscious of time. How are we going for time now? I'm going to be respectful for the next person who comes in.
10
It's
minutes.
10 minutes. I would love to dig in a little bit more just on you mentioned at the start of like the EVP and how to communicate that and whether you should do an EVP or not on that piece. So I've just had Darrell also come in saying that is definitely true. You have 10 minutes. It'd be great to just talk a little bit about it. I know a lot of people say, because that EVP is such a big investment for organizations. And, there's a case to be said, hey, you're going in and do we just start with the content and build a rhythm of that and our messages? Because your brand's already out there, right? So it's not like you can't control that. Do we want to start there or do we want to start to build an EVP, the brand pillar at the start? So can you maybe give some context to that?
Yeah.
Types of organizations you've worked with? If it's a bit more smaller, where would you jump in first? If it's a bit larger, yeah.
Yeah. I think anywhere I would start by asking the people on the ground. Like, I think a lot of times we walk in, recruiters think they know, hiring managers think they know, and they do know some stuff. But I think when you really ask people, why do you do what you do? Why are you here? Even about the day-to-day stuff. How do you feel about pay? How do you feel about benefits? How do you feel about rewards and recognition? And then my really fun question is to ask people, like, perception. What's the perception when you tell your family and friends this is where you work? You will get a load of information from that question. Or even what's the perception in your community of this company? And from their point of view, what's the perception? I think from those questions and interviews, you gain a lot of insights. And I know you can hire, agencies and lots of people to come in and do it for you, but I really feel like when I'm asking the questions, like, as I'm hearing answers, I'm really understanding what it is. And so what I try to do is come in, do the interviews. Even at Data AI is a great example, actually, where came in, did the interviews, and what I realized really fast was, this is not for the weak of heart. Like, you don't come here and, like, think you're just gonna like do what you've done and it's going to be an easy job. And people loved that. Like, they thrived on, like, this is hard, it's not for everyone. And so we wrote that into the EVP. We usually try, or what I try to do, right or wrong, you guys can tell me, but I try to come up with 3 pillars. So the thing is even when I'm talking about, like, with Marriott, and I kind of walked through it earlier, it's begin, belong, become. At Data AI, we had 3 different pillars. And then under those 3 pillars, we put, like, even moments that matter in the associate experience, because those should all line up under those pillars. If this is what I'm promising you that you're going to get here, then those moments that matter should line up and they should come across. And then we even get it down to, like, these are the words we are, these are the words we aren't, So at Data AI, like, I mean, we were really very heavily focused on, like, high performing. And we wanted to make sure we got the message across. We wanted people to self-select out if, like, that's not the world for them, because It's not the world for everyone. I mean, I got kids. I know. Yeah. Anyways, we won't go into those stories, but we wanted people to self-select out. So we come up with those three pillars. Then it's the messaging. It's the words we are, the words we aren't. When I do see some stories where EVP gets caught up in like these like 6 month cycles where we're trying to figure out the messaging and write the branding around it. And I worry when I see that sometimes because I think things change a lot and especially fast right now. And so one of the things we've done at Marriott is even though we have these pillars of begin, belong, become, we want them to be customizable to like any audience and at any point in time. I mean, not to bring up COVID, but if it taught us anything, it's that anything can change on a dime. And so we want begin, belong, become. It is about our journey as associates. It is what resonates with associates. It is about the culture here and brands the culture, but it's in different ways and in different pockets. We're a million person company. We have 9,000 hotels around the world. I think it's over 9,500 now. The culture is good and foundational, but it plays out in different ways. So what that allows us to do, and especially like with our different brands, is we can sit there and we can say it's begin, but it might be beginning your career in hospitality. If we're trying to attract, the other day I had a conversation, this is a real life thing, rev management associates or rev people that are in rev management to our hotels, we're probably trying to attract people that have never worked in hospitality before. And we're trying to make them aware that they can do this job in hospitality. And so we're saying, hey, you can begin your career in hospitality. We're like, if we're attracting people that graduated from hospitality school, we're not saying that, right? But we might say something like begin your career at Marriott, right? And the same thing with belong. We can come up and we can customize that if we're attracting veterans. We can say belong to a community like you did when you were in the military. Or if it's becoming, that looks different for everybody. If it's becoming something in your next stage in life, if it's becoming something in your next professional career. But I think that's one thing to think about EVP is it's not, I don't know. I've never had a lot of luck spending a lot of time figuring it out and a lot of money figuring it out. It's more of like putting it into play and then using it in content and using it in distribution. I mean, at the end of the day, EVP is supposed to be branding your culture. Aim towards that.
Just in the last couple of minutes, Dara's going to kill me if I don't ask it, but when he was the sales guy who first reached out to you years ago, in the last couple of minutes, he was like, anytime Shaunda ever chats to me, she always reminds me, this is the best mistake I ever made. So I would love to hear that as the closing remarks on that.
I totally, yeah. So I have a friend named Dara, first of all. And here in Utah. And then I was also like in the middle of trying to leave a recommendation for one of my past employees on my team. And he had let me know, hey, I'm going to this job. They're going to call you for a recommendation. So I saw this number pop up and I thought, I got to get this call. And so I answer it thinking I'm giving a recommendation. And here it's him. And I'm like, wait, like I've heard of the Martech before. I've looked at this before. And he started talking about like just some of the things you guys were doing. And it was mostly the AI that pulled me in. It was the fact that like, he's like, no, like it'll help you write the questions. You just pop in your EVP and it'll help you write the questions. And then it helps. And I'm like, hold up, what? Let's talk about this again. And so we always reference it as like the best mistake I ever made because I guess I referenced it as that because I had no intention of talking to him. But when I started really digging into what the Martech was and like how it could help us in our content. And I was also jumping into this job at Marriott where I was just like, oh my gosh, we have to capture content for every job family, every brand, every region, every country. And I was freaking out about content. And I was like, this is the magic bullet. This is the thing that is going to help us with that and help us organize it, capture it, and put it out there. So it was, the best mistake I ever made.